banter. Or not. It's a lot of gremlins in the system tonight. All right, I'm hoping that this is now working. We are resuming after executive session. We are returning to open meeting. So welcome everyone. Thank you for waiting while we finish our executive session. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting online may use ActonTV's YouTube channel found at the top of the agenda. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on ActonTV's website at actontv.org. I'm going to start really quick, and then we will invite our wonderful student representatives to come up for an update. So we start this fresh new year with the continuation of our FY24 budget, continuing our conversation about the FY24 budget, where preliminary planning has been ongoing since fall. This is the committee and the community's first look at a more concrete picture. This is the most important thing we do as a committee, and we are beholden to many stakeholders. I hope that we can meet the conversation with open minds, holding multiple truths at once. It is January, which means that we have officially begun municipal election season. I hope that we will see multiple candidates for the seats open in both of our towns. Elections with true competition and debate that is healthy is important to our town's political life. So we have not experienced that for a while. One must wonder how healthy we are. I am coming to the end of my term of service to the town of Acton, and I will not be seeking re-election. I was asked to run, and I have served my community sacrificially, and it has been my honor to do so. It is time to return to writing stories and enjoying audiobooks in my minivan. I wish my colleagues the best of luck with the work that they do without me. I hope that people of similar spirit and commitment will choose to seek election and do this good work. I urge you to pull your papers and get started. You can do so now. And with that, let's get to work. So, we will welcome our high school representatives, student representatives. The representatives report at the first school committee meeting of each month and share some student perspective on current events at the high school. So I'd love to invite Rohan, Harshini, Mali, Diksha, and Julia if you are here. Anybody or all of y'all, come on up.
Rohan's not here today, but my name is Harshini Magesh, and I'm a senior at ABRHS. Today, I want to give an update on two issues that have been previously addressed. one being the Wi-Fi and the other being the censorship of certain websites at the high school. As for the Wi-Fi, it has significantly improved since last year, and it is accessible in more parts of the school. However, it is still very spotty and in certain areas within the school, so it would be great if the connection could be improved. Additionally, the guest Wi-Fi is also slightly better compared to last year, though it takes a long time, sometimes around 5 to 10 minutes to actually connect. And this, I've heard, is inconvenient for the many students who prefer to use their personal devices from home rather than the school Chromebooks to take notes or to do work during classes, since they have to use this guest Wi-Fi. Additionally, regarding censorship, the issue of many educational videos on YouTube and many articles from news websites like Foreign Policy and the People's Daily being unavailable due to blocked keywords on the Chromebook still remains. And since many students tend to solely use their Chromebooks both within the school and at home to do research and other academic work, I believe that it would be beneficial to all if the firewall was reevaluated. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, go for it.
I think that's a great point around Wi-Fi. Just to give a quick update, one of the challenges around Wi-Fi, we actually have a number of access points in the district that are ready to go to the high school. Unfortunately, when we opened the new building over at the Boardwalk campus, due to supply chain delays, all of the Wi-Fi access points were delayed, and they're due to be installed, I think, over February vacation. But all of the Wi-Fi access points we wanted to put in the high school had to go to the Boardwalk campus just to provide basic service. So as soon as that campus gets taken care of, we think the high school should improve following. And I think it's a great point about talking maybe a process to unblock specific websites. I know we have to block certain things, but maybe a request form that we can unblock or evaluate a website would make sense. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Molly Norris. I'm a sophomore, and I don't have much to say because December was once again a pretty chill month and we had break, so not that much happened. But I would just like to mention that clubs this year have really they've just really raised their participation, and they've just been a lot more, I don't know. Last year it was hard to see what the clubs were doing because of COVID, because there were lots of people whose parents weren't letting them go to clubs, and there were lots of issues with the clubs and people out and stuff. But this year there's just a lot more people in the clubs, which means they can get a lot more done. My friend runs the Interact Club, and they've been doing a ton. There are plenty of clubs this year, and they're all doing a lot more than they did last year. And I think it's just nice to see that. I know COVID is an issue right now. I mean, I got COVID in December, but it's not as desperate as it was last year, and I think that's a good thing. I really appreciate that. So, thank you.
Anything else from our wonderful students?
All right. Hi, my name is Julia Zhou. I'm a freshman at ABEA, and I'd like to give a quick update for the community regarding Community Service Awards night. Yesterday evening, I think it was a great success. I know that I, as well as a lot of the other students, really appreciated a lot of the community coming out and showing support for us and the volunteer work that we've been doing. And I'd like to thank the school and as well as Principal Dean for all the work that they've done with putting together the awards, as well as giving us opportunities to give back to our communities. So yep, that's been great, I think. And then also this week at the high school has been a wellness week for us. So each day we've been doing a small mindful activity or just a wellness activity during lunch periods. And I think that's been really beneficial for us. And I've seen a lot of students that have been participating with the alpacas on Tuesday, and then the dogs and cats in the gym yesterday, as well as Makerspace today. So I think that's something that we can continue doing in the future, whenever possible. And I think it's been a great way to put the community together and to bring friends together. So thank you.
There were alpacas.
Yeah, one of them was wearing a bow tie, and the other one was wearing a little tiara.
the best.
They were absolutely adorable.
Come on. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Diksha, Mhatre, and I'm a freshman as well. I would like to talk about ABRHS, which is the AB Student Equity and Justice Club. This weekend we're going to be volunteering at an event at the Beth Elohim Synagogue in Acton. It's for MLK Day. And I'm excited for it because I'm going to be volunteering, and Tanisha Sullivan is going to be participating there. She's going to be speaking, and I'm looking forward to that, to be honest. And she's the president of the Boston branch of NAACP, and she also ran for Secretary of State. And so if you would like to come, you can come, and you can also register on Zoom. And I urge you to come because it'll be a wonderful event, and we'll get to hear her speak, and it would be inspiring. Thank you.
You may go for it.
I've heard Tanisha speak a few times. She is so inspirational. I mean, she will absolutely knock your socks off. She's amazing.
All right, thank y'all. Thank you so much. All right, we're moving on to public comment. Per school committee policy BEDH, members of the public are typically invited to speak for up to 3 minutes regarding items that are not on the agenda. For items that are on the agenda, the public is asked to please wait for that item. Speakers must be recognized by the chair before speaking. The committee does not typically respond to comments during public comment. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? Mr. Peterson, Happy New Year.
Hello, John Peterson, 6 Jackson Drive. What do George Santos and scientists working at ExxonMobil in the 70s have in common? For anybody who followed today's news, they were more than
everything.
And so obviously, you know, it's disheartening to see adults make such consciously bad decisions over and over again. I mean, in the case of Mr. Santos, it's pretty clear the kind of self-interest that drove him to say the things that he said. In the case of the scientists at ExxonMobil, who clearly benefited theoretically from substantial educations, why they, over the period of time that they were aware of the impact of climate change, you know, elected not to speak about what they knew is a little bit more mysterious. But the point of all of that is simply the reminder that there are lots of things on the curriculum. There's lots of things that we test for. Hopefully, we're equipping our students in a way so that when those moments come to them, they will have the moral clarity that they need to make good decisions.
Thank you, John. We miss you, John. We do, sincerely. Any other comments? All right, y'all. Let's rock and roll to the superintendent's update. Good evening, Peter.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back and Happy New Year. I am also going to start with the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Service Awards night that took place at the high school last night. I think, you know, it's really important to recognize that Dr. King was a singular figure in American history in his ability to help our nation forge a new vision for racial justice and equality for all. Each year, our high school commemorates the legacy of Dr. King through its Community Service Awards night presentation. This past Wednesday, the high school recognized 602 students who each performed more than 20 hours of community service in the last year. And in aggregate, they completed over 63,000 hours of community service. We are incredibly proud of the emphasis our high school and students place on service back to our community. It's really powerful way, I think, that our district commemorates and the high school commemorates Dr. King's legacy and simultaneously recognizes our student service. So thank you to all of our students and thank you to the high school for that important event. Congratulations, everyone. It's School Committee Recognition Month. January recognizes our school committee members and student representatives. So thank you to all 11 of our members and 5 student representatives. Sometimes we forget that all of you as members are volunteers. In the work that you do, you give hundreds of hours each year to help our schools realize the vision our community wants for its children. So on behalf of all of our staff, administration, and community, thank you for your service. We are launching and will be providing information on a new upcoming youth and mental health webinar series that we're launching in partnership with the Cartwheel Care organization that we've been working with over the course of the year. The first webinar is going to be entitled Youth Mental Health in a Digital World, and that is being offered, if I can get myself to the point where I remember to wear reading glasses, because evidently I need to now. It's being offered Wednesday, January 25th from 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m. And we're going to be sending out a registration link in advance of that. But this is going to be a 5-part series over the course of the spring on various topics around mental health that have been identified by families and staff. So we're excited to be launching that. We also are going to be hosting our kindergarten general meeting to welcome our new kindergarten families next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And we are sending out the information about that, as well as the various meetings at each school that parents can attend to learn more about the various schools. So that work is upcoming. And then we will be sending out the reminder of our community coffee schedule. Our next community coffee that Kyra and I do is January 18th at 7 o'clock p.m. on Zoom. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And so, we ready to move on to the next item? Okay, yeah, cool. Okay. So our next item of will be new business. And we're moving on to the recommendation to appoint a new deputy superintendent. Are you ready to go?
All right, so I will invite Andrew up to the interrogation desk. Can someone turn the spotlight on? No. You know, I am really pleased to be able to present Andrew Shen to you in consideration as the next Deputy Superintendent of Schools for the Acton-Boxborough Regional School District. As you know, Marie has announced her retirement. Marie is irreplaceable, so I'm not saying he's replacing Marie. I'm just saying we're presenting him as the next deputy superintendent. Andrew has served our district for a very long time. His resume is in the packet. He has been an assistant principal in the district, principal at junior high for a long time, and he's been at the central office level for the last 2 years, serving as director of special projects. He's really helped us move the ball on a number of different issues since he's joined central office. He's been working closely with Marie on a variety of human resources projects over that time as well, particularly during COVID, and thinking about some of the COVID mitigation strategies we needed to use during that time. Andrew, I believe, has a very high level of support from our faculty and staff across the district. He works directly with all of our principals and assistant principals throughout the year, and I know they hold him in high regard, or they've come here to speak against him, but I don't think so. No, seriously, I really think the principals hold Andrew in very high regard. I think he's going to be a valued asset to us at the district level as one of our 3 senior most leaders, and so I'm happy to present Andrew, and I'll let Andrew say a few words, and if you have any questions for Andrew. And then ultimately what I am doing is seeking your vote to appoint him, and there's a memo in your packet which provides all the information around that, as well as the motion.
Thank you, Peter. It's nice to be here. I have a few thoughts that I wanted to share, and then I certainly wanted to just sort of preserve space for any questions that you might have. I think certainly I need to start with a few words of thanks. Certainly a thank you to Peter for feeling that I am in the position to take on the role of Deputy Superintendent. It's something that I'm very grateful for. I appreciate his confidence in me, and I also appreciate the last several years working with him in developing a relationship that I think hopefully he feels is one that will be supportive of his work and his vision. And then in addition to that, I certainly think the only reason I could be feeling confident in moving into this position is certainly the work that I've had with Marie for the past 15 years. Along with supporting me as a principal and assistant principal, I think what Marie has always done for me and for others is given us opportunities to take on roles beyond the specifics of the positions that we hold. So even as a principal, there were opportunities to take on central office roles, district-wide roles around personnel, around hiring, around leadership. And so there was always this commitment from Marie to cultivate and mentor the rest of us in the work that's important for the district, but also a chance to learn from her. And then certainly once I've come into central office, that ability to partner with her is more direct and more daily. And so certainly along with the learning from other people, Marie has a big job. I think people realize that many things in our district are built around her and by her. And so taking this on is both exciting and a little bit daunting. I'm sure next year there's going to be plenty of moments of, well, that's how Marie did it, only in a good way. And so I accept the challenge, although a little bit nervous about it. And then certainly, moving forward, I feel very lucky that I might be in a position to continue professional challenges in the same district. I think satisfaction in one's profession often is assisted by being in a place where you enjoy the people with whom you work. And so to be able to have continuing professional challenges and new challenges, but with people that you already have relationships with and with whom you enjoy spending time and collaborating is something that I don't take for granted. So it's just another reason why I'm quite excited for it. I'd like to thank the colleagues that are here for not bringing signs. That's much appreciated. And with that, I'd welcome any questions.
Somebody please ask this man a question, please. Y'all know you have them. Go for it, Adam.
I don't really have a question more than a comment that I'm really excited to continue to work with you, Andrew, and I think that both your professionalism and sense of humor bring an excellent balance to the work you've done, and I'm looking forward to continuing that and continuing to harass you about your lovely selection of vests. 'Tis the season.
Thank you, Adam.
I don't really have a question, but I just think that a lot of times you hear criticism that administrators don't really, or that there's a disconnect between administrators and students. And I can personally say that one of the most impressive things that I ever witnessed was being in the junior high with 900 students and seeing like every single kid's name, which is no small feat. And I think that the fact that you have that experience of connecting with students and having those relationships with parents, like I literally never, in all of the many times that I had to have your assistance with my challenging children, ever felt like you didn't know who they were. I mean, you knew who they were, you knew all the things, and I think that that says a lot for an administrator of an enormous school like that, and I think that that will serve you well in this role because it's absolutely true that you understand the population you're serving, and I think that that is a real testament to your ability as an administrator. So I'm excited for you to take on this role.
Thank you, Tessa.
I wish I had a question too, but I mean, the time that my kids had at junior high was really special, and I've never heard any parent that I've had conversations with say that, oh, man, that Andrew Shen, he doesn't know what he's doing.
I could give you a list if you'd like.
I mean, really, you're always the name that comes up with like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. These are pretty amazing. So I'm very excited to have you not fill Marie's shoes, which would be very difficult, but definitely step into her almost impossible role that she's been doing for the last 15 years. 25 years, 100 years. No, I mean, just for how long it's felt. Just how long it's felt. And I'd like to make a motion, if you guys don't mind. I move to appoint Andrew Shen as the Deputy Superintendent of Schools effective July 1st, 2023, pending successful contract negotiations with the Superintendent of Schools.
Second.
Can you give it co-seconded to Ginny and to Tessa, so we can have it on the record for history that everybody jumped to make this happen. And so, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Congratulations.
Thank you. I will not miss the current title of my job.
And yet, there are still so many special projects that we can give you between now and July 1st.
Andrew, just so you know, some people have wondered why we kept the title of Deputy Superintendent. I do have a star for you waiting.
On to ongoing business. It is time for the budget presentation. Are you ready, Peter? While everybody's getting set up, I just want to say I'm so grateful that our young students are still with us and hanging out. It means so much. Always just so impressed by our AB students. I really am.
All right, so thank you, everyone. Before we get started on the budget update, I want to just make sure I thank all the members of the leadership team. You see a large number of them here tonight, so thank you all for coming. But more importantly than just showing up tonight, this has been already a several-month process for our leadership team in the development of the budget that we're presenting to you, and this is our preliminary budget. So, you know, you're getting tonight more information than you, at least since I've been here, and I think, you know, even going back years, you're seeing more information earlier in the budget process because we know that this is an important budget process and it's a challenging budget process. So our goal tonight was a little bit different than traditionally, where we kind of give you the really high-level overview at the beginning of the process and then gradually more details, but you don't really see the detailed personnel information until relatively late in the process. Here we wanted to provide as much information early so that you had the information and we had ample time to deliberate. You could discuss what you wanted to hear more about, what questions you had, ask us to come back with more information on certain topics as we progress. Just wanted to acknowledge we're doing this a little bit differently and we're front-loading more information in the process this year. And that flashing screen is really distracting. All right. The first part of this presentation is all perfunctory information, and it's just making sure we're all on the same page about overview of the budget process and timeline. Tonight, we're going to do several things. We're going to talk about the timeline and the process. We're going to give you some detailed information about the FY24 proposed district budget, including revenues and budget drivers, strategies we've used to balance the budget, proposed personnel changes, and talking initially about all-day kindergarten and what tuition would look like as we move forward. We also want to get some preliminary feedback around our approach to the budget and to inform our next steps. In particular, what we'd really like to do as we go through this process tonight is have you think about keeping track of the areas in particular you feel like you want to spend more time on. Like if you hear something and say, I really need to spend more time on that and learn more, make a note now, because that would be great feedback for us, because we can then use that information either tonight or you can email me and we can make sure we plan presentations on those various topics over the next several meetings. Overview of the timeline. We already did kind of we called it now a pre-budget presentation because in December we gave you a high-level overview of some of the challenges of the budget and the budget drivers. We're coming back for our first presentation tonight. That will evolve next time. As we go, we know we want to have more of a discussion of all-day K next time. We're going to just give some preliminary information this time. We want to dig into it next time because we're hoping that we can get an all-day K tuition vote in early February, because it's important for our parents and families to be able to plan around that. We're working toward our budget workshop on presentation 4 on February 16th. However, I will say a lot of the information in that budget workshop that we traditionally do is actually already in your slides tonight and in the backup material. So it might look a little different when we get to the traditional budget workshop. And then we have our public budget hearing in early March, and then we need a final vote on the budget on March 16th, because that is the last meeting, that we have to vote the budget before the town meeting schedule. And so as I talk about the town meeting schedule, we always use the 2 town meetings to plan backwards. Acton has the first town meeting this year, now that they've permanently moved town meeting to the first week of May. So May 1st is when Acton town meeting begins, and May 8th for Boxborough. The final school committee budget vote has to be 45 days before the earliest town meeting, so March 16th is, I think, 46 or 47 days before that. You have to also vote a preliminary budget that comes up, and that has to be 25 days before the final budget deadline. So we would look for a preliminary vote on that February 16th date. I just think it's important before we start a new budget process to keep talking about our kids. And I want to just lay a little bit of the groundwork. Our district spends just about at the state average in terms of per pupil cost. We are not a high spending district, and we don't spend below state average either. We are pretty much the state average. We serve about 5,200 students with a variety of needs and have about 800 employees, but that number actually excludes all of our bus drivers, custodians, things like that. So that number is actually higher than what you see on the slide. Almost 30% of our students now are classified as high needs. That's increasing over time, and it's slightly higher than our comparable districts. And as you can see from the slide, we have about 11% of our students who are economically disadvantaged. About 4.5% are now classified as English language learners, though we like to use the term multi-language learners. That's 91% higher than our similar districts. And, we have about almost 15%, 14.5% of our students qualify for special education services. I want to just talk about some of the changes that we're seeing. You've seen some of this information before, but as we talk, we are a rapidly changing district. And I think one of the things that we need to make sure our community understands through the budget process is I think everyone's perception of what they believe the students in Acton-Boxborough look like may not be the students that we're serving today. And I think it's really important that the community keeps that in mind. I particularly want to point to some of the rapid changes among our either low-income or economically disadvantaged students. We're seeing an increase in that over the last 5 years, which has been significant, and we need to make sure we're supporting our students and families who have needs. But in addition, the 2 slides at the top of this frame are the increases in multi-language learners in the district, and really looking at, in the bar in red is showing that of all of the multi-language learners that are coming into our schools, we are, I'm going to say 50% higher than the state average in terms of the number of students coming who are in their first 2 years in the United States. 100% higher. 100%. No, it's 40 and 60. It looks 100%. The bars are off. So, but that's really significant, that 60% of our students who are coming in are in their first couple of years in the United States of our multi-language population. We do graduate out a large number of them on an annual basis, so that's why that number is high. But that's a really important concept to keep in mind, and it's going to come back later in the budget presentation. We also want to keep in mind that some or even many of our students continue to have increased needs following the pandemic and have either lagging academic skills or lagging social emotional skills. We are seeing a significant need for mental health and behavioral health supports among our student population, and what I'm calling a critical need for English language acquisition support. We want to maintain the core focus on student sense of belonging, relationships, climate, and culture, and also keep in mind that we want to continue to support equitable opportunities and outcomes for students. We want to support their social emotional learning and continue to grow our practice around that. We want to make sure that we have a culturally responsive and sustaining school district focused on inclusive practices, and we also want to make sure we're really highly engaging our students. And those are really important ideas that as we think about how we're budgeting, that we maintain our focus in those areas. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but we had 3 district goals this year. One was around social emotional learning and mental and behavioral health. We also had a goal to ensure that all of our students in the district were on a pathway to proficiency in literacy and mathematics, with a heavy emphasis on third grade literacy proficiency and eighth grade proficiency in mathematics. And then we also wanted to really make sure that we were improving our students' sense of, and families' sense of belonging by thinking about climate and culture in our schools. We had several initiatives as well, which were other projects that we were working on. We have been evaluating course levels at the high school, and I know Joni and her team have started planning a community engagement process around that, and I'm going to be meeting with them upcoming to start getting our community engaged in the dialogue around that. The next item, STEAM visioning, quite honestly, we paused because we had too much going on and knew that we just couldn't do everything. What we are thinking, though, as we move forward, as part of the high school's accreditation process, which is a very, very important process, it is required that you create a portrait of a graduate. We actually have an opportunity to include some of our STEAM visioning in that process that would be coming up. So we might just kind of roll those two together as we plan forward, because we don't want to lose sight of the work. It just might have to look a little bit different and be delayed by a year. Our administration, through a lot of dialogue, I captured some of the priorities that our administration had developed, which tried to come through in this budget, although you'll see it couldn't always make it to the forefront. But certainly trying to maintain appropriate class sizes across the district was important to us. MTSS implementation was extremely important, and among the top couple of priorities we had. Thinking about the supports we need to have in place for our students with disabilities and for students from other underserved populations. We wanted to increase language acquisition supports for multilingual learners, continue to build out the elementary literacy curriculum, because that was actually an important part of MTSS, because it's really about Tier 1 instruction. And then continue to integrate culturally responsive and social practices and social emotional learning into schools and classrooms, increase access to our advanced coursework at the high school, and we need to continue to prepare for NEASC and Portrait of a Graduate work, because that's very important and, quite frankly, just has to be done. School committee, you also created a series of budget guidelines, which I think are very closely aligned with the administration's budget guidelines. That's probably a good sign. But you wanted to also consider the impact of collective bargaining agreements on our ability to provide service for students, evaluate the opportunities for organizational efficiencies in order to prioritize services to students, including those who've been disproportionately underserved. I'm hoping that you see that come through in the budget proposal we have in front of you. We have evaluated class sizes at all levels and budget to the degree resources are available to maintain class sizes within school committee guidelines, and we're asking you to actually vote those secondary guidelines tonight, later in the meeting. We've already seen them a few times. We want to ensure that our students have access to a robust system of supports, i.e. MTSS. Continue to promote student sense of belonging through a strong and inclusive school climate and culture. Provide resources to address disproportionate outcomes for students who have historically been underserved, and continue a path toward tuition-free all-day kindergarten to the extent that it's economically feasible. I will not read all of those at any of these subsequent budget meetings, but where we're kicking off this process formally, I think it's really important just to acknowledge the district strategy, the goals we've had, the administration's priorities, and the school committee's priorities, because it's important to keep in mind as we try to progress through this. Overarching all of this was a deep understanding, however, that the town of Acton is taxing right now at its levy limit and is constrained in its ability to increase revenue. And so this committee gave the administration guidance to target a 3% assessment to Acton, and you will see that in this budget. At the time, we thought that was overall a 2.5% budget increase. That number has shifted a little bit, and I'll let Dave go into more details about that. But really, the targeting the Acton assessment to the 3% was probably the overarching budget driver that led to this presentation in the format you're seeing it. You can just say next slide, and I'll steer for you.
Okay. Some of these I'll go through really quickly because they're obvious. This is an overview of where the funding comes from the budget. It's basically 5 sources, the 2 member assessments and 3 categories of outside revenue. over 80% of the funding for the budget is from the assessments. This is nothing new, but just want to, as a reminder. And we start with the answer. The total budget you see there in red, 105 million. 747 is the amount that's going to be presented as the preliminary budget. I wanted to show it to you now because some of the calculations, percentages and whatnot are going to be based on that number. So we'll start with the answer. We'll go back to the beginning and some details and end up at the answer again. You've seen this in a prior presentation. It shows that state aid is increasing somewhat. The chart is a little bit, you need to focus on the fact that the bottom of the chart starts at 15 million. So the green shows that Chapter 70 is increasing a little bit, but all told, state revenues are only going up in the last couple of years by about 1% annually. We've got some other slides, some other graphics that we're going to zip through, and as soon as I get to this chart, this is in summary form a 5-year presentation of the different components of revenue. Revenue funds our budget and offsets the need for assessments to fund our budget. I'm trying to say it as many ways as possible, just to make it clear the importance of revenues in the budget process. You can see the yellow band near the bottom, that the percentage of revenue that goes to funding the budget has been decreasing. And as revenue as a funding source decreases, that means that assessments and reserves have to pick up the slack to make 100% of funding of the budget. And you can also see that the growth of revenue versus budget growth has not kept pace either. One observation I made about this, percentage of budget growth from the prior year, the district's 5-year average, excluding the impact of the new school debt in 2001, is about 2.8%. We have shown slides, and we'll probably dig it out for the Budget Thursday presentation again, how the district's budget growth as a percentage has been at the bottom of our comparable communities. You could pick a 3-year period of time and say, well, all right, we're under for that period, but it continues to happen. As far back as I go, the district's budget growth has been very, very small in comparison to other districts. And I think that needs to be kept in mind when taking a 50,000-foot view of our finances. And again, just another way of showing the difference between revenue growth and budget growth. Go back to Adam's presentation of a few meetings ago. When revenue growth does not keep pace, it needs to be offset by higher increases in assessments, and just the interplay between how much we assess our 2 member communities versus how much is able to go to the budget from outside sources. 4-year average here, budget increase 2.9%, revenues are only up 1.5%, and you can fill in the blank, because I've said it about 3 times already, what has to go up as a result. You've seen this slide as well. It's not going to belabor it. We still have a healthy position of E&D. We've used more than we had certainly before regionalization or the first few years of regionalization. And it should be noted that the budget that we're presenting tonight reflects a $250,000 decrease in the use of E&D from $1.5 million this year to a projected $1.25 million next year. As Peter said before, Acton is the one that drives the ceiling as to where our budget needs to come in to be able to be funded. We received guidance both from the committee and from the Acton Leadership Group to target a 3% increase in our assessment to Acton. Because the initial assumption about enrollment, and enrollment drives the allocation of the assessment between the two communities, we used last year's. Boxborough's, as you'll see in a few minutes, Boxborough's enrollment has gone up higher relative to Acton, and as a result, a 3% increase to Acton is achievable with a 2.77% budget increase for the district. Some of the budget drivers we'll get into more detail probably in the Budget Thursday presentation, but at a high level, the things that are taking up additional resources in developing the budget, the Health Insurance Trust voted a rate increase for active and retiree health insurance premiums next year of 8%. That's down from 10%. It's not where we'd like it historically to be in the 4 to 5% range. Retirement contributions through Middlesex County for non-certified staff, we assumed would go up by over 5% because of the historical trends and the actuarial funding mechanism for that system. Out-of-district special education for private schools, private special ed approved schools, are allowed to go up 14% next year. That guidance is several months old. Out of the box, we put a 14% increase on all of our special ed administrative costs, and it's something that I'll talk about in a minute, but the fact of the matter is that out-of-district costs are expected to increase by 14% next year. That is a state-approved rate increase. And utilities, everybody in there who's a homeowner knows that the cost of utilities has increased. That's another 5% estimate as far as driving the budget estimate for budget projection for next year. Salary increases will be what they'll be. Historically, they've averaged about a 4% increase when we look at steps and lanes and COLA and attrition in the aggregate. So when we take all of these things together, we were looking at about a $5.6 million increase. The math still works pretty well, 5.6 million, 5.4%. That's to fund all of the services next year that we are providing this year. We started, when we look at a budget, our starting point is this year, $102,900,000. We valued a level services budget at $107,269,000. That's a little less than what was shown in the previous slide. I'll explain it. And as I said before, what you'll see tonight, the preliminary request is $105,747, 2.77% increase. Our level services number, 4.25% increase. We valued all of the services and costs and estimated inflation that we're providing this year and calculated what those things would cost next year, and it's a 4.25% increase. But there is about $1 million of costs included in this year's budget that are on expiring grants, such as ESSER 3 and ARPA. Those are the two main ones. We embarked on the MTSS plan on the back of significant funding from ESSER. The ESSER funds will run out pretty much at the end of this year, and so those costs to keep the services provided next year need to be brought back into the budget. This year, we added special education assistants after this year's budget was passed, significantly so, $275,000. Those costs need to be added to this year's budget to provide the same services to meet IEP needs next year. And as Peter had said before, our need for EL services has gone up significantly and continues to rise, and so the budget includes provision for 2 additional EL certified teachers. Adding all of those things, that's where we get the number that Peter had before, 5.6% increase, or $108,600,000. That was effectively our starting point to get to 2.77, and so we faced the challenge of needing to close a $2.8 million gap. How did we do that? Well, fortunately, there were some revenue recalculations that were able to be done. State aid, for one. I have a chart here. It's too small for you to see, but it's basically a sideways C that shows the curve of interest rates. And so we're with interest rates going up, we were able to comfortably add to our projection of investment income from next year. All told, a little less than $200,000 increase in revenue, which offsets the need to make further budget adjustments. So we're now down to $2,676,000. We looked at, I had said before, a number of cost budget drivers that were estimated to be 5% or higher. When we actually dug in and looked at all the benefits and insurance lines in the finance budget, we could cut $75,000 from our estimates. However, the assessment for choice and charter participation was a little bit the other way. So in revisiting the finance department budget, we came up with a few dollars toward closing the gap. As I said, putting a 14% inflation factor on the entire special ed department wasn't going to work. We anticipated that from the beginning. When we looked at estimating the actual costs for students next year who will continue to be expected to be in the district and on IEPs, we were able to reduce the gap by $625,000. Not all providers will go up 14%. Collaboratives, for example, will go up based on their operating budget and their directors' assessments. Instructional budgets, we further cut by $150,000. That's about 5% from the budgets from everybody who's sitting behind me. That's on top of the fact that they're being asked to continue to buy supplies and materials and the like, which have increased because of inflation. And so their buying power is reduced and their budgets are being even further reduced. And finally, we made a small cross-charge of funds from utilities to be borne by the foods program, which is the financial bright light of the district in this year. Taking all of those adjustments, we're now down to a remainder of $1.8 million that needs to be adjusted. This year's budget, $103 million. Just running through everything that I've just said. Cost of level services, $107.3 million. $1.3 million of budget additions, largely expiring grants. We saved $200,000 by updating revenue projections. We reduced $900,000 by updating expenditure, non-personnel budgets, and there's $1.8 million required, which has to come from personnel to get down to the number in red, the preliminary budget. So how are we going to do that? You're going to see a separate presentation in a minute. It came about through input from the senior leadership team. We focused primarily on attrition-based reduction, and we lucked out in that there are a significant number of them, as you'll hear. Some central office departments have been reorganized to improve efficiencies. One of the priorities in the budget goals was to maintain appropriate class sizes, and lastly, trying to avoid catastrophic reductions in staff. From 1 through 5 and avoiding 6, we were able to achieve the targeted budget adjustment of $1.8 million. Revenues haven't kept pace. I think this one might be out of place, but I'll take, I think it's probably me. Again, revenues haven't kept pace, so the revenue increases are in green. It's the shortest one every year. The assessments are in purple. They have to be higher than the budget because revenues aren't keeping pace. It's important to just understand this relationship, that the assessments as a percentage increase are higher than the budget as a percentage increase because revenues aren't keeping pace. And this slide shows as a percentage what we had to do to get back to a proposed budget. The yellow, we came in with the final answer in FY22, was in the shadow of the pandemic, and so we were at the end, at the beginning, so to speak. For this year's budget and next year's budget, we costed out our level services, and they were significantly higher than where they ended up, much more so for the budget that we're presenting now. So the value of the red bar is what we had to cut from level services to achieve a budget that we could present.
Okay, you're on still.
Yep, so what does all that mean for the assessments? You can see that the assessments based on the prior average 3-year enrollment for Acton and Boxborough. Acton's, I said the smaller numbers are the change from the prior year, so Acton has been down pretty consistently. Boxborough was down pretty consistently until October 2022, 3 months ago, and they're up 47 students. That has a tremendous effect on the average. And so last year's average was 84%, was pretty much exactly 84% Acton and 16% Boxborough. Because the numbers shifted so dramatically, Acton's share actually went down by 0.3%. 0.3% doesn't sound like much, but when the total assessment is in the $80 million range, it's a big number. And I'm going to quantify it in 2 more slides. I didn't reproduce table 6 here, but how we get to the assessment is to look at the budget. So the 105.7 million, Acton's share and Boxborough's share based on the allocations. Revenues and reserves of 20 million, again, allocated to each town based on the allocation percent. And the net assessment then is 85.7 million, which is a 3.37% increase over this year. That works out to be 71,774 for Acton, just under a 3% increase at 83.71%, and just under 14 million to Boxborough, or 16.29%, and that's about a 5.3% increase. You see the interplay and how the enrollment shift takes a 3.3% total assessment, and because Boxborough's share has gone up so significantly, its assessment as a percent is a lot higher than Acton's. It's a smaller pie, 71 million to 13 million. And so any whole dollar increase on Boxborough's is going to be greater as a percent. It's important to understand this, that Boxborough is not There's nothing punitive here. It's straight mathematical calculations. And so lastly, I wanted to see for myself what the change in enrollment did. And so the assessment is 85.7 million, and the allocation is the numbers that appeared in the previous slide, 71.7 and 13.9. If the allocation had been the same as last year, in other words, no change in the relative enrollment between the two towns, Acton's assessment would have been 72,037,000 and Boxborough's would have been 13.7. The change in enrollment shifted the cost by $263,000 from Acton to Boxborough. Again, not saying this with any glee I reside in neither community, but when Boxborough's numbers were, Boxborough had a negative 2% assessment change a few years ago. It was this in reverse. I will say though, that the significant change in this October's enrollment is 1 year out of 3 in the average, meaning that increase has 2 more years to work it through the 3-year average. And so absent any further seismic changes in enrollment growth between the two communities, it's probably safe to say that Boxborough's enrollment is going to continue for another year or two, growing at a faster rate than Acton's. Thank you.
So I'll just talk briefly about how we've been treating some of the various aspects of what we were funding through pandemic relief, because I think it's important that you see kind of our approach to what we're doing with it. So I categorized what we're doing through pandemic relief now into either we want to continue it, so we're including it in the budget. We are choosing to discontinue it, so it's now excluded from the budget, or we've modified how we're budgeting for it. So it's somehow combined between the two. So the things that are funded this year through pandemic relief grants, either ESSER 3 or ARPA money, include things like math specialists, literacy coach, cartwheel care, the expanded mental health services for students, our Assabet Valley wraparound services for families in need, and then Panorama, particularly the dashboard side of Panorama that supports the MTSS work we're trying to do. So those are areas that by and large we want to continue to fund in the budget. We think they're strategically important. In particular, finishing off the build out of our math specialist and literacy coach for MTSS purposes was really important to us. That group of individuals is really having a high impact on our students and student learning right now and supporting teachers. So we're bringing that into the budget. We do have a little bit of ARPA money left, so you can see there's a couple things. Cartwheel, we want to just kind of do that over 2 years, bring it into the budget. But Cartwheel has been tremendously successful so far. Assabet Valley wraparound services have been tremendously successful for several years now. So those are really important that we preserve those. Things that we made some hard decisions on that had been grant funded, additional professional learning through the Leadership Academy. We would love to continue that, but that's something that we're going to have to not fund in this coming budget. New seed leader training. We've sent people to the training. We have seed leaders still, but we're just not going to be able to send more people to the national training to become trainers. The LIFTS program for trauma sensitivity professional learning that we're doing for all educators at K-8 this year, we're not going to be able to fund the continuation of that. We'll still offer graduate coursework that we can fund through course reimbursement for educators, but in terms of additional professional learning, we don't have the funds to continue that. We also really didn't get what we were hoping for in terms of ARPA relief around all-day K. And then we have some being funded for that right now, but we're proposing that we don't bring it into the budget because the rest of our reductions are so significant, but that's certainly something that we can talk about as a committee. Things that we've modified, we've shaved off some of the amount of what we're currently funding for culturally responsive teacher leaders and SEED leader stipends. These are existing educators. We'll still have seed leaders and culturally responsive teacher leaders in every school, but we're going to have to reduce by a few the total number of these individuals we can have across the district. Some of that work has been really challenging for us to think about not continuing in its current form. And I just want to really acknowledge that because it's important strategically, but we're in a position where we have to really make some difficult decisions here. So I'm going to recap some of what Dave said, but some strategies to balance the budget. Dave already talked about, looking at revenue adjustments and other cost-saving strategies that were not personnel-related, so I won't talk about that more. He's also talked about discontinuing, or I just talked about discontinuing or reducing funding through grants. And now the areas that we're focused on moving forward here are we're creating a smaller, more efficient district or central office leadership. This is also something that, as I went and talked to educators around, the top priority for educators was continuing to provide services for kids in classrooms. There's no doubt that that was the case. We were in alignment as an administrative team with what our teachers were telling us in our schools. And so, we really looked hard at district level leadership in this budget. We looked at what we would have through attrition, either positions we decided not to fill this year and are vacant, or retirements, resignations, things like that we knew were upcoming, and really evaluated those hard to see what would need to be filled or what could be reduced. We've looked at some reorganization of work. We really looked hard at our class sizes at just about every level in every classroom across the district to make sure that we were budgeting efficiently and appropriately, but had to make some hard decisions there about, falling within guidelines. And then, we have to talk about what our tuition-free all-day kindergarten plan is going to look like. It's something that's very, very important to all of us, but we're really struggling on the revenue side to try and keep up with funding that at a full pace that we've been at. So some of the non-personnel strategies, Dave already talked about a 5% instructional supply budget reduction to all schools and departments, and that's on top of inflationary increases. Additional reduction at the junior high operating budget. The junior high principal, Jim, came forward and said he actually thought he could have another reduction on top of what we had already reduced. We are increasing the use of circuit breaker reserve in this budget. We are decreasing the number of positions. I mentioned this around culturally responsive teacher leaders and seed teacher leaders. And then we do have some of those remaining ARPA funds to continue to offset Cartwheel Care and Assabet Valley Collaborative. We're going to talk about proposed personnel changes, and I'll start at a 50,000 foot level, and then we're going to go into some of the detail. I want to say that this was incredibly challenging. Our entire leadership team, I can't express enough that the value all of our leaders place on the staff that we have. And when you make reductions, you're in a position where you have to start talking about the value that you have to do. There's no way around it. And that's really hard because every person we have is in this district because they serve a purpose and they serve students. And so as we talk about reductions, it's not that we don't value a position, but we have to make some hard choices. And I just want to acknowledge that. I also want to acknowledge before I start that while we tried to do a lot through attrition, we are also talking about real people here who come to work every day in the service of kids. They give it their all. They go home. They do more work at night and are just extremely dedicated. So it's hard on our staff, and I know this is a frustrating process, but I just want to acknowledge that up front and just really give a shout out to our staff because we really love our staff. Overview of proposed changes. We already talked about we're proposing adding 2 positions. I'll detail that on the next slide. It's in multi-language learning education or English language learners. Reductions total 22.4 FTE. These are now almost all licensed certified staff. We reduced classroom assistants last year. We are not proposing any additional reductions to that. We're actually at a point now where we need to have the staff we have for non-certified positions just to run our schools the way they need to be run. So I want to really acknowledge we really can't make additional reductions there and function effectively. So the net change in FTE going into next year is down 20.4 FTE. The additions, 2 English language educators are necessary to meet some service delivery for multi-language learners. We just had a state review of our program. We're anticipating they're going to come back and tell us we don't have sufficient staff to provide the number of minutes we need. We're anticipating it, so we're budgeting for it going forward. We really don't have wiggle room on this. It has to be done. We are also cognizant that we're having our first cohort from the Pathways program at Blanchard will be moving to the high school. We will need some proportion of support for related service providers in that program. We don't anticipate that what we're going to need to provide there is going to have a really significant impact on the budget, so we didn't list it here. But that's certainly on our minds. So the way we approach this, we looked hard at attrition, and then we also knew we were going to need to make additional reductions. So of the reductions we're proposing, we have 9.2 we were able to achieve through attrition, so it doesn't impact people's employment. But then we also had 13.2 additional positions that we were going to need to reduce. So by level, just how it breaks out, 6.2 of those were from district-wide administration and leadership. 5 were at the elementary level, 3.6 at the junior high, and 7.6 at the high school. I will say, and I shared with our staff during our budget presentation yesterday that I did for staff, at the elementary level, going back to the peak of enrollment, I believe it was, Marie, we had 136 elementary classrooms, and we're down to 119 today. We've been reducing elementary school classrooms as enrollment has declined over that period of time. We haven't made those same reductions at the high school level over the period of time, but the enrollment reductions are catching up to the high school. So that's why you're seeing slightly higher reductions at the high school than at the elementary level, and then the junior high is about half of the size of the high school. So that's why the numbers are commensurate there. The way we looked at prioritizing reductions, we looked at attrition first and to see what could be done through attrition, because we know we're dealing with real people here. We then looked at district leadership, or, you know, kind of how administrative functions, including administrative assistants across the district, and what we could really look at from a support function. We then looked hard at class sizes and wanted to make sure our class sizes were budgeted, you know, with student needs in mind, but also in an efficient way that could make best use of our resources. And then finally, we just still had to make more reductions, and we were at this point getting into, in that fourth category, things that were going to have a significant impact strategically, were, you know, backing us up strategically, would significantly impact students, you know, and really some decisions that, quite honestly, I don't think anyone on our leadership team really liked anything we came up with, but anything else we tried to come up with, we also didn't like. And so, unfortunately, we're just in a position to do that. If we could do anything in this budget, that last category really deserves a serious look at how that could possibly come back, because you know, I'm not comfortable presenting it, but I have to get to the budget number, but I really think we should give that some consideration. You know, a couple of the decisions we made in the budget do increase class sizes at our elementary school, just beyond guidelines. I want to acknowledge that, but overall, we were able to maintain class sizes within school committee guidelines. So that was kind of the overarching message. We didn't have to wholesale increase all of our class sizes above guidelines, so that was something we did avoid. So these are the positions that we were able to eliminate through attrition. And you can kind of see the location in the right column, whether it, you know, what level it was. Was it a district-wide employee, elementary, high school, junior high? And so, you know, there's some significance in this. At the central office level, among the most senior leadership team, which is a pretty small group of people, we're actually reducing 2 positions from what we had last year. As you recall, the director of operations got an opportunity, left the district at the beginning of the year. We knew we were heading into a challenging budget situation, so we chose not to fill it this year and try out having, you know, Lucky Dave in his last year with us took on 2 jobs. We're going to leave it like that and continue to have, you know, 1 director of finance and operations and consolidate those positions for efficiency. Similarly, you know, when I brought Andrew to central office a couple of years ago in his role as the director of special projects, We did so, quite honestly, with the knowledge that at some point within the next multiple years, Marie and I had had conversations that she knew she would retire at some point, and it was really important to me to have, kind of a succession plan in place. And so with that, we would also eliminate that position of Director of Special Projects. So we're going down 2 senior level central office positions in this budget. When we analyzed enrollment late last spring and into early summer, we knew our K enrollment was a little lower than anticipated. So at the time, we chose not to fill a position. So now we can eliminate that in the budget as attrition. There was a high school social studies position that was vacant coming into this year. We know that there's declining enrollment at the high school, so that was one of the positions we listed. High school special education assistant just was not required for services at the level, so that was vacant this year and doesn't need to be in the budget next year. Junior high campus monitor. We had a retirement last spring for our district-wide digital literacy coordinator. This one hurts a little. We held off for a year knowing the budget was already tight, and we're not going to propose budgeting for it, but, that's certainly a loss for us not to have that role in the district. High school science position, we have a retirement. Again, there's declining enrollment, so that will be through attrition. And then these two I'd put in the same category of the digital literacy coordinator. We had 2 vacancies in our district-wide art director and our district-wide PE director. We didn't fill them this year. 0.6 of their job is coordinating all of the art and physical education across the district. Our current music director is supporting, but we also have staff supporting some of those functions right now. We're getting by. I don't think that's a long-term solution to those areas, but given that they're vacant now and we have an opportunity not to impact current staff, we also have those on the attrition list. And forgive me, I know this is a long presentation, but I really think it's important to have a little bit of context on each of these. District-wide administration and leadership, I'll put a caveat that if you're looking at all the numbers, and for all you math people, either in the room or at home, they're not going to add up in that traditional sense. Because these are now, of all the positions, what would be categorized as leadership positions? I've already talked about some of them on the attrition slide, so they're grayed out. But I wanted to list them here just to make sure we were understanding what we were doing in each category. So I won't talk about the ones in gray, but in addition to that, we looked at some administrative assistant support at the junior high and high school in either the counseling and registration processes. And so we're reducing incremental pieces there. And then the really hard one as well is going down 2 of our district-wide curriculum coordinators. This was a really hard decision for our team to make. We have great curriculum coordinators in the district, but one of the things that we really looked at is in all of the staff that we've added over the last several years, the greatest gain has actually been in curriculum staff outside of special education. And as we had to make some decisions, we decided to prioritize the staff who were in schools, in our instructional coaches, our STEAM coaches, as well as our literacy coaches and the math specialists and reading specialists in schools, because they're either, full-time working directly with kids or directly with teachers who work with kids. So that was a hard decision to make, but we did end up deciding to prioritize that. So we have 2 positions on the leadership reduction for that as well. In terms of priority 3, as we looked at class sizes, again, the ones in gray were through attrition. The ones in black are not through attrition. These are people that we will not be able to continue with next year. There is a high school English position. Again, that's because as we look at enrollment at the high school, it's gone down. Similarly, we're putting another elementary kindergarten section on here because we've seen a pattern of lower enrollment in K. We're putting it on the list right now. We're certainly going to have to watch kindergarten enrollment as it comes in. As we go through spring. And we might come back to you with a problem if it changes significantly from what we think the pattern is, but we think this is probably realistic. Junior high school world language teacher. We looked again, just really looked hard at class sizes and what we needed to budget to. And then the 0.4 in PE and art teachers, you saw the 0.6 director positions on the previous slide. Those had been whole positions, and they taught 2 classes at the high school and were 0.6 administrative And so this just says we're going to reduce, 2 additional sections at the High School of Art and at the High School of PE. Not whole teachers, but two sections of those classes. Here's where it gets really quite uncomfortable, because I don't really think we like any of these things that are up on this slide. But we still needed an additional 7 positions to get to that target assessment and target budget. And we looked at all sorts of different opportunities across the district and just really had to make some challenging decisions. This is, again, the area that if we could get anything back, I would hope we could get a good amount of this or all of it back somehow through some adjustment. I don't have an answer to it, though, at this point, which is why it's being presented to you. 2 of the positions here are going backwards strategically. We've worked really hard to get certified librarians. We place a huge value on what we've done in that area. But this would move backwards and essentially have to go back to providing instruction with classroom assist or with library assistants instead of certified librarians in 2 of our schools. This looks at a junior high school PE health teacher, but class sizes start to really become very high in that area, upper 20s, which is significant. High school TV radio studio manager. This is a non-certified position, but does a lot of work, particularly with some of our students with disabilities at the high school. The challenge that we had around high school TV studio production, they do a fantastic job, but the enrollment right now is pretty low, and we have 2 people in that studio supporting the program. And I'm just not sure we can continue to have 2 people with enrollment as low as it is. Senior seminar coordinator, this is a .4 allocation at the high school for some part-time work. An individual who coordinates internships for seniors. We also have an individual who teaches the senior seminar class. I know Joni and her team want to continue this program, and they're going to have to think about different ways to try and structure it a little bit differently. But this is another one that we really don't like on the list. One of the ones I personally am extremely uncomfortable with, but we don't have many other solutions, is actually reducing an elementary first grade section. And I want to make sure I'm clear about the significance of this. What this means is somewhere in the district, we have a current class of kindergartners that would not have a first grade classroom to go to in their existing school. And what it means is we would actually have to get to a point where we transfer a group of kindergartners to some different schools and or increasing class size at that one school. As I said, I'm really hopeful we can do something about the number of positions that we have in this list because this is not a good solution. Similarly, high school counseling, I think we all know the mental health needs of students right now. We really don't want to be in a position of cutting a counselor. The reason it's on the list is as we looked at all the other departments and declining enrollment in the high school, we can still meet all of the national and state standards for counselors to student ratios if we reduce the counselor, but boy, do we not want to do that. So as I said, we don't think these are great, but we have to get to 7 positions somehow and the budget number. And so that's kind of where we landed with these. I just want to come back to this and summarize a little bit. We were able to do 9.2 through attrition, and then it gets progressively more and more painful as we go. So 7.2 of the positions were, district leadership or people who support leadership. 5.8 were through an examination of class sizes, and then the really impactful or, kind of negative strategic growth type of reductions were still 6.4 of the positions. So, this is significant in terms of reductions for the school district at a level that, is going to have an impact on kids and is going to have an impact on families and certainly staff.
Can you hear me? Okay. This sounds like a lot. It's like 3 slides, I promise. So I just wanted to sort of connect. In December, we talked about enrollment, class size, projections, all of that. How does that relate to where we are with the budget today? So these columns, K through 6, so this is specifically elementary at this point, what was in the budget for this year, And I'll just start with kindergarten. We had 17 kindergartens in the budget. We had fewer kindergartners than had been projected, so we cut one of them after kindergarten registration last spring, but it was still in the budget for this year, so that will help us sort of this year, end of year. But we certainly took that out in this budget. So this year we actually have 16 kindergartens in FY23. When I talked to you in December, early December, the kindergarten numbers are volatile, and for the last 3 years or so, the projection has been quite a bit higher, and the number of kids has been quite a bit lower. Now, might that change? Hard to know. There were years, 3 years before that it sort of went the other way. Just to remind you, in this year, the projection for this year was 330, and we have about 300. 298. The projection for next year is 330. I put on this slide projected students 310. We're going to be somewhere between 300 and 330. I don't know. So if we had 310 students, which is my best guess at the moment, we start our kindergarten process next week. We know of 270 who have sort of filled out a form to tell us that they are coming. So we'll see. The number will change. 300 to 310 right now is my best projection. If we had 310, we've cut a kindergarten. We would have 20.7 kids on average across kindergartens. The class size guideline is 18 to 20. 20 to 21, I'm not going to say it's good or bad. If we have 300, we're within range. If we have 320 or 330, I'm going to be coming back to you, and we're going to be shifting some other priority to make sure we don't have 22 or 3 kids, whatever, in kindergarten. We're not going to go that high. So we spent, and our principals spent, lots and lots of hours looking at what could be done within the budget and what would have the least impact on kids, the most impact on kids, etc. If you have to cut a section, kindergarten is the place to do it because you don't have to move kids and you don't have to significantly increase class sizes in a particular school. Very begrudgingly, as Peter said, we put a cut of a first grade. So, on paper, does it work? Class size, 21.1. It's somewhat fractional around the range. It might work, but Peter nicely explained what it would mean. Now, we have lots of kids come every year and lots of kids go every year, and it depends what grades and it depends what schools. So we're talking, if we were to cut this one classroom, it's the current kindergarten going into first grade. Some of those students are on wait lists for other schools. We would certainly ask for volunteers to see where people are with that. We do that every year anyway. We send out the wait list. A lot of families come off the wait list because they're really happy with the school that they're attending. So some first graders will move out. Some first graders will move in. First grade is a year we do get a jump in the number of kids, and some may want to move to another school. So it's a little bit hard to predict, but a classroom that currently has, I'll call it 18 or 19 kids in it, if 3 or 4 leave just through mobility, if 5 or 6 want to transfer to another school, or 8 or 9 want to transfer to another school, we've still got 8 to 10 kids we've got to sort of figure out what to do with. And so we would do our best to distribute the kids across 6 schools, a total of 15 classrooms, but you can see kind of how it would play out. So of the things, if we can move anything into the better column, that first grade, maybe some of the other things on that bottom list are very high priorities to try to retain. I just wanted you to sort of see the progression of what's happening. It's a little, when you try to follow this, the first column is the first two columns are this year. So I did a little arrow there because the kindergarten, the 16 kindergartens this year would go to 15 first grades. And it goes down like that all the way down. So the rest of the grades advance as normal, if you will. So that's just sort of, other than that, we're relatively within class size guidelines. And then there's the next slide. This is just, we're going to put a discussion about all-day K on the next agenda. We knew this was going to be a lot tonight. I just want to sort of remind you, this was the plan of what we thought we were going to do and a year ago. And of course, it's been many years of sort of trying to figure out how to improve the kindergarten tuition situation. We were able to, with the generosity of the ARPA grant, move the tuition from $3,750 to $1,800. Very significant drop in tuition, which was wonderful for our families and our kids. The plan was to keep it at $1,800 for 3 years, use ARPA money, and then add $180,000 to the budget every year for 5 years, and then $80,000 after that to fund it. So we thought we could do that with ARPA. We thought we were going to get a total of $500,000 of ARPA. We're at really $400,000 of ARPA from our 2 towns. And if we go to the next slide, I'm just showing you what changed since the original plan, at least as of right now. So we have $400,000 from ARPA. We have not put money in this budget. We have not increased the amount of money in the kindergarten line item for relieving all-day kindergarten. We did last year $180,000. We did a previous year, but the $180,000 for next year's budget is not in this budget. So we're going to have to really talk how to address that. So from the plan a year ago, we don't have $180,000 that we've added to the budget, and we don't have $100,000 of ARPA. However, because we didn't need as many kindergartens this year, the expenses are also not as high as we had originally projected. So I'm going to say that again. We thought we needed 17 kindergartens this year. We went with 16 kindergartens this year. In so doing, we don't have as many staff to pay. And so we thought we were going to spend $721,000 this year. We're spending $680,000 this year because some of the salaries were paid for in the budget, some of the salaries were paid for through tuition. So that starting number is $680. Next year's number is $597. And so we thought next year's number was going to be $570, but that was if we put $180 in the budget. So even though we didn't put the $180 in the budget, the expense line isn't as far off as it could have been. So we'll come back. We have options. We can increase tuition a bit. We can lengthen the number of years we're going to put amounts of money in the budget. But we just wanted to kind of, in the big picture of what is in this budget, what isn't, we did not increase the tuition. I mean, we did not increase the amount of money per se in the budget, but also the expenses are not as high as we thought they would be because we don't have as many classrooms, if that's sort of the short story. Okay?
So I just want to go and wrap up a little bit here. And again, you know, we're planning that you're going to want to have an all-day K discussion at the next meeting. So we'll really dig in. That would be more of a discussion to talk about what options there might be. But we just wanted to give you the overview of the challenge today. Just to summarize, so the FY24 preliminary budget is a 2.77% budget increase, with assessments totaling 3.37% of 2.99 to Acton, so we're under that 3 mark, and 5.33 to Boxborough. We've already detailed all of the cost-saving strategies, and there were many that we tried to use in this budget. Proposed personnel changes resulted in a net reduction of just over 20 individuals, but we're adding 2 positions for English language educators, which we just absolutely need. We are going to have to talk about a revision possibly of the all-day K tuition plan with the possibility of increasing tuition, which is something we don't want to do, but we need to put it on the table for discussion until we have a different strategy that we know of. And then, you know, this is actually, believe it or not, this was only a couple days ago, but this is now old information in this. The strategies incorporated into the budget still result in a $560,000 gap on the ALG plan. However, the town has made a couple $100,000 of additional reductions since this slide, and so we're now down to about a $300,000 gap on the ALG plan, which is a reasonable gap to have in January. So, you know, it doesn't mean it's a comfortable place to be, but the gap is reasonable to expect that it will get closed. And I don't foresee additional reductions. As I said, I really want to see how this budget can evolve, and that really that last category, there's at least a strong handful of things in the last category that should come back, if not all of that last category. So looking forward to, you know, seeing how it evolves, but that's what we have for tonight. Our next meeting is 2 weeks from now. What I would love to gather feedback from you tonight, or you may need to think about it a little bit, because I know there was a lot to take in, and you could email Kyra and I with ideas, but I would love to know the things in this budget that you want to spend more time on. You may see some things that you say, okay, I don't love that, but I know it has to be. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on that. And then you may have other areas of the budget that you say, I really want to dig into this. And it might be something we presented, it might be something else that you have as a question. But what we'd like to do is be able to structure the agenda as we move through this process around what you need to know, so that we can also be thoughtful about bringing the information that you need to have an informed discussion of it. We will also have the line item budget details for you for the next meeting. All-day kindergarten, certainly I've mentioned a couple times, will be on there. And we do want to start talking about capital budget. We are doing a refresh right now of the capital plan, and we have a consultant going through all of our facilities to help us prioritize again the work that needs to be done. You know, I already know, I've been receiving letters every few months now from the state because we have a telephone system that is not E911 compliant. And that is the law that it has to be. That's several $100,000 of a liability that we have to do. It's something that is of high value to every staff and student in the district, because it ensures that when someone calls 911 from any location, the fire department or police department knows the exact location within a building. And that's really important to have. So we've already tackled, Blanchard is now compliant, Douglas and Gates are compliant because we built the backbone into the new school, but we have to finish the district. That's going to be important work. We also know we have some roofs that are liabilities to the district. The admin building roof is more like a sieve at this point than it is a roof. And I know, you know, we lost a whole slew of human resource papers last year when it started raining, and, you know, it rains in the building now. That's a liability for us. The Blanchard roof has been on our radar for a while. We also have rooftop units at the high school in Parker Damon that are nearing end of life. And there's federal grants now that are substantial to electrify, which is also a strategic goal that we have from a conservation and efficiency standpoint. So those are some things out there, and we do believe it's also important for our staff to have heat and cooling when it's necessary. And so those are important projects as well, because we've seen them fail more often now and need more repairs. People aren't as comfortable, and we're getting concerns from staff around those type of capital items. So we need to be thinking about some of our big capital items as well, and we want to have discussions around that with you as well. That's also going to be work with the capital subcommittee and the debt strategy subcommittee, because one thing I will tell you that we at least have reached out to the two towns to put a placeholder on is the possibility of repurposing some of the money from the building project that is unexpended. So the building project, the town's appropriated $117 million for the project. The total project budget came in at 114. So there's a $3 million swing there between what's been appropriated and that. The possibility of repurposing that money to take care of some of the big capital liabilities that we have, because it's money that's been authorized. We would have to go back to both towns for approval of that. And we want to talk to the debt strategy subcommittee about it that we had originally put together. We want to talk to capital subcommittee. We're certainly going to do a lot of outreach to towns and building committee around that. But it's money out there that the towns previously had said we want capital projects. It's an opportunity to not have to go out for another bond later by being proactive. So we put it on the radar of both of the town staffs, and we mentioned it at ALG today. But we're assuming that, staff will start talking to, different entities in the town. So we wanted to make sure you knew. We at least put it out for discussion so people could put placeholders on the warrants. Okay, so I'm happy to take comments or feedback.
Okay, so I just want to remind everybody that this is the first of multiple conversations. So, all right, so we're going to go in order from this away. So Ginny first.
Thank you for that, everybody. I know a lot of work goes in that. I'm just handing out for everybody's consideration a full-day kindergarten fact sheet, which is drafted by it's a science-based and evidence-supported fact sheet by Early Education for All, which is a nonprofit organization which does a lot of work in this area, and it just is specific to Massachusetts. I have a few extra copies if anybody's interested. It's also available online on strategiesforchildren.org. And, I think that as we are all thinking about it, it's important to just reiterate that we are charging tuition for families who live in our communities to send their children to public school. It's penny wise and pound foolish. Because these kids fall behind. It's a burden on our family. It's inequitable. And, we're one of a very, very small minority of communities at this point that asks our families to pay additional money beyond their taxes to send their kids to public school for more than 2.5 hours a day. So I think everybody knows where I stand on this, but and I recognize that we have to make some very, very difficult choices. But I just wanted to hand out that fact sheet because it's only 3 pages and it contains a lot of information for your consideration. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that detail. Thinking about next time, I would like to know a little bit more about the proposal of eliminating or not, a discussion of the 2 library media specialists that you would have to reduce, and what would that look like? Is the thought that it would be at the 2 twin schools so that there is still 1 library specialist? What is your thinking and what is the strategy around? Because I also know that that's very important to time on learning when you have a library, a professional staff taking responsibility for a classroom, which frees up a teacher. But in order for it to be counted as time on learning, we need to have a certified staff. So that was one thing. And just a little bit more about the ramifications of losing a counselor at the high school, because it feels like, what's that caseload going to look like? And how is that possibly going to work? So those are just 2 things that jumped out at me, and I know there's a lot more I'll just need to think a little bit more about it.
One clarification, so can you put up slide 76? Oh, that's different on the one that I have. The elementary classroom and class size one, not that. My slide 76 says that, yeah, that. So are we adding, well, we're keeping a second grade classroom, but there's only 16 first grades going into 17 second grades? Is that right?
I think I have a mistake on the slide. So, yeah, it should go to 16. I'll double check those numbers. Every grade.
I figured, I
Yeah.
figured, but it just
Yeah.
stuck out. Because you also said there's a lot of times a bump in first, like kids move in and whatever else. I just wanted to know if it was a mistake or not. I agree with Amy. I want to talk about the library assistants because that'd be a huge step backwards. I understand what you were saying about the TV and radio thing and the guidance counselors. And my concern is that we're affecting some of our most vulnerable students. We have all of these, and the senior seminar coordinator. I mean, we're talking about courses and classes and sections where you have your most vulnerable high school kids who maybe don't love high school. And those are like the areas where they might be looking for other things. We spent a lot of time talking about why so many kids are going to Minuteman and everything else. And I mean, I heard your explanation about the thing, but I feel like those are areas where we should be going in the other direction. Like we should be encouraging kids to go do those things. And especially if they're working with kids with disabilities, I just really wonder about that. I mean, I was part of that class size discussion at the high school as part of the policy subcommittee, and looking at some of the sections of academic coursework. I mean, we had really, really low numbers with many fewer kids in like freshman English and these things. And I'm sure you spent tons and tons of time looking at it, but I did look at those numbers as part of policy sub, and I don't know, it just really worries me that those are the areas. I understand it's the smallest number of kids. I mean, I walked into the high school TV and radio station when we did our tour. It just really worries me that we're cutting programs or cutting staff to programs and high school counseling as well. I can't even imagine how, like, their caseloads are huge, and the high school counselors take on, I know from personal experience, much more than college counseling and all of that. They're really providing a huge service to kids who are struggling, and so I would want to look at those.
Hi. Thank you so much for all the work that you guys have done. I mean, just being on the budget subcommittee, I've seen a little bit of how the sausage is made, and it's no fun for anyone. None of these cuts look good. I have a feeling we're all going to have a different thing that sticks out to us, it sounds like. I have a first grader this year. He's a pretty anxious kid, and so that one is the one that bothers me the most. I can't imagine the logistics of having my kids at two different schools, but also that could be, pretty traumatizing for a kid to be pulled from his school community, put on a bus to some other place. So that's the one that I really feel like is at the top for me to try to avoid. It would be great if all the kids in a given classroom, wanted to move to a different school. That would be fabulous. But yeah, that one really freaks me out when I think about it. It's kind of scary.
So yeah, similar to what Amy and Tessa mentioned. So, but Peter, you already explained like high school counseling. Originally, it's good. You explained the functionality of the role of that position. Originally, I thought it's kind of you explained some function. So I would say it would be good if you explain more the role and the not only just high school counseling and also like curriculum coordinator. I thought how that's going to be impactful. I mean, although it's a 0.4, right, I saw. Curriculum coordinator. So for the elementary school. So it's a small, but I would say for a bunch of, so you explained a little bit already. I mean, I get that part, but for a lot of the positions, it's going to be due to the enrollment decrease. I would say that's fine. But for a lot of positions, it's not induced by the enrollment decline. So it'll be good to help us to understand that there's a, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter, Marie, Dave. First of all, I want to say that we're looking at cutting 22.4 of our most valued educators and staff members at the district, and I think that really stinks, and I want to recognize that. And so I guess the things that I want to look at are what are the strategies and what are the things that we can do to recover some of those most important positions that we're losing. And then additionally, obviously we want to look at all-day K plans. I don't think we can go back. So I think that, as we present options, I think we want to see a multitude of options that at least maintain a status quo for us or some way to move forward with that. But when it comes to how do we regain some of these positions that you're proposing that we're losing, I have two questions or two asks in terms of sharing some more information. First would be, obviously we did reduce the amount of reserves that we're using this year. So what does it mean if we start to dig into reserves? And how does that apply to saving positions versus reducing assessments? So that as a strategy to recover some positions. And then the second area, which I think would be really helpful for more information for the committee is, what does it mean if we open up a couple seats for choice students, particularly at the secondary level? We've talked in the past about reductions in class sizes shrinking enrollment. What does it mean to add 5, 10 choice students, particularly at the secondary level, in terms of effect on class size, but also those funds that would come in that could help offset some positions that would get reduced. I think that again, I'm just looking at every opportunity to make more revenue or use our reserves in a way that protects some of those positions that we don't want to lose.
I didn't want to go again until. So I wanted to say that I do not want the takeaway tonight to be similar to what it was last year, where we just said we just want it all go back and figure it out, because that's definitely. I mean, we understand that we are in a very, very serious situation, but I also know that as you've made these very difficult proposals, you didn't do it by just going down a list and just crossing some things out. I know you did it with some thought behind it as to how you would make it work. So I guess as all of us talk about the things that stick out to us personally that we find concerning, really just kind of understanding if it happens, what is your plan to, what is the idea of how we have to do this, but here's how we're going to make it work. So I guess that's what I'm asking for. I'm not asking you to go back and take it off the table. I'm asking for you to just help me understand that if it has to be done, that you guys all have a safety net to make sure that we can get through it. And as Adam was saying, I very much would like for us to look at spending more of our E&D and doing a lot less of having to cut. But I understand the limitations.
Can I summarize what I think I'm hearing from you? basically, you want to come back, have a deeper discussion of each of those items in that last category in particular. And I heard curriculum coordinator as well, right? So come back with more information about those areas next time. And then additionally, come back with more information about impact of using more E&D, what that would look like, and or other revenue sources that we could possibly increase, including, you know, possibility of school choice. Is that a fair summary of what I think I'm hearing right now? And then all-day kindergarten is a given that we put a separate placeholder because we knew that would have to be part of the discussion. Is that good summary as of right now? Okay, that's a good plan for next meeting then. That's helpful to know, because we can also ask staff who have input into those areas to come and be able to speak to each of those items, the impact, what it looks like, and what that means.
I think that if we can add to that anything that's non-personnel, just like doing one more sweep of non-personnel, non-student facing, either reductions or just fungibility or, you know, just creativity, whatever it is we need. Because we get it that there's, you know, we were asked by our FinComs and by our select boards to think about, you know, reductions that were not student-facing, and that's what we've been presented with. And so, you know, a lot of the things that are non-student-facing are also the things that we absolutely must pay for. But if there's any wiggle room, or if there's any fungibility, which I know is Mr. Peterson's favorite word, and I'm glad that he's here. If there's just any little place where, you know, something can be wiggled here to there, even if it's temporarily, to get us over this hump, I'd like the opportunity to look at it.
Okay.
Mr. Peterson, come on up.
I do. Thank you for really an exquisitely painful presentation of the challenge of the FY24 budget. I think it was clear that everybody felt exactly that pain. And it was interesting both that you commented at the end, you know, with respect to capital, and that Kyra, of course, said, isn't there some way we can do some of this without student-facing cuts? And as you said, you can look at the corner at that water stain or the peeling paint up there or everywhere else. And I think Adam in particularly remembers, you know, the pain of saying, we need to do some capital all the time, you know, and obviously there's some specific things that need to be done. And then there's some things where if we don't do it, those chickens definitely come home to roost. So I wish you well, obviously, as you sort through those priorities, but I hope you'll have a very explicit discussion of those capital activities as part of the overall budget process.
Good evening, Mike.
Thank you. All right, can you hear me? Good evening. My name is Mike Balulescu. I'm the president of the Acton-Boxborough Education Association, or the ABEA, the district's teachers union. I'm also an Acton resident, and I'm also a Merriam School parent. I'm here tonight to speak about the proposed budget cuts our district is facing. I want to begin by acknowledging that you, as volunteers, did not get into public service because you want to cut teachers' jobs. I know many of you personally, and I know that you are here seated at this table because you want to serve our students in our school district. I'm not here to criticize or malign you or the administration for having to make incredibly difficult decisions with limited resources. What I am here to do tonight is to raise the alarm in our communities about what all of us, myself included as a taxpayer, are doing to our school district. We collectively have a responsibility to our students to fully fund our schools, and we have failed in that responsibility. However necessary these budget cuts are financially in the present moment, I need everyone here tonight, and especially everyone watching tonight, to know the consequences we are reaping by not fully funding our schools. These budget cuts are right now taking a painful and personal toll on talented educators across our district. When preliminary notifications began about position cuts last week, I was contacted by panicked teachers looking for answers and looking for help, with their world suddenly turned upside down. I heard about teachers crying in their classrooms and in their cars, wondering how they could work so hard and give so much for their students, only to be told that Acton-Boxborough can no longer afford to retain their services. But my concerns go beyond the empathy I know we all have for those losing their jobs. This is the second year in a row that financial circumstances have forced us to cut staff in our schools. With every cut we make, we are taking away educational opportunities from our students. With every cut we make, we drive down teacher morale, already whittled and withered by years of grueling pandemic education. With every cut we make, we ask teachers and administrators already giving everything they have to this job to somehow find a way to give more. Our communities cannot continue down this path of parsimony and austerity. Fully funding our schools means staffing at a level determined by the needs of the students in front of us, full stop. Fully funding our schools means providing resources so that the most vulnerable families among us have the supports they need for their students to access their education. Fully funding our schools means creating a work environment where teachers feel supported and believe that the job they are being asked to do is possible and feasible. And yes, fully funding our schools means having the financial ability to pay our teachers competitive wages so that we can hire and retain, especially retain, a diverse and world-class faculty. I hope that you and everyone else tonight listening will join me in sounding the alarm to our communities. We are not fully funding our schools. We are not giving our teachers or administrators or this committee our full support to do the vital and important work we are here to do. We are not giving our students what they deserve. We, all of us, need to do better. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments either from the committee or from our audience? Okay, thank you very much. Let everybody go back to their seats. Adam, do you want to give a budget sub report?
Sure, I'll give a brief update. The budget subcommittee met on Monday, and we reviewed a preliminary set of slides that we all just reviewed tonight and provided some feedback to Peter and Dave in terms of some of the content and some of the areas that we wanted to focus on. I'm pretty much done. That's what we did. We met, we looked at the slides, you saw the slides, the end.
So I'm gonna give us, 30 seconds just to say goodbye to our friends. Thank you so much for staying late, y'all. We know it's a long day. Okay. Very cool. All right, thank you, Adam, for that. All right, then we are now pivoting to the FY24 school calendar, which is up for a second read. So a first read of the proposed FY24 school calendar was done at our last meeting on December 15th. Is there any further discussion? There is, right? We should talk about this? Yes.
Yeah, I can. So first, apologies. I wanted to say thank you to our administrative team for coming. It's a late night for them. They start work very early in the morning, so very much appreciated their presence here tonight. Want to talk about school calendar. So last I came to you, we had a couple of dates for a couple of the no school days that were listed inaccurately because when I typed in the date of a holiday, I went with 2022 or 2023, and it was actually 2024 I needed to think about. So I went back and I plugged in the correct dates into the calendar I had originally proposed, and it ended up having some school days as no school days on that. And the challenge that it proposed, and you're looking at the first page of the calendars in front of you now, is that the last day of school would end up being the 20th of June. And you can see that means that we have a no school day on that Monday. We then bring kids in on a Tuesday, they're out on a Wednesday, and then they have their last day of school on a Thursday, which is a half day. We also have to think about, just the continuity for everyone, but in particular, the high school has final exams scheduled, and the ability to have continuity to a schedule, that's a really challenging schedule. And if we end up with snow days, which, it is New England, but it's also 50 degrees out, that would put us potentially at the 27th as the 185th day. I just don't think this is a viable calendar at this point, so I looked at two different alternatives. And so, I've worked with Mike Balalescu around this and looking at different options, so I want to thank Mike for the partnership, but wanted to propose two possibilities, and both are acceptable in terms of the contract and how ABEA approaches it, so we've already talked about this. Option B, on the bottom right-hand corner of your calendar, just to make sure we're looking at the right option, would essentially bring teachers back on the 25th, which is a Friday, and then they'd be back Friday and Monday, and then students could start on the 29th. That would result in the last day of school being the 14th, which is not awful, but we also have to anticipate there'll be some snow days, so we still are into that really rough week of school. If we have any snow days, we're in, 2 snow days and it's ugly. But we don't have too many other alternatives to that. The alternative calendar, I'll propose C, and quite honestly, I think I would speak for, many teachers when I say this would be the preferred calendar is C. Would actually bring teachers in on Monday, the 28th. So they don't have to come in on a Friday, then have the weekend, and then come back. They get that whole previous week. They'd come in on the 28th. They'd be with us the 28th, 29th. Students come in on the 30th. This would actually be something that came out of the last round of teacher negotiations, where it's now okay to go to school on the Friday before Labor Day. And so in this one, we would at least, once we bring kids in, they're with us. Now, we've had a lot of those Fridays off, so I didn't know which one the committee preferred, but I wanted to propose those two. Mike can certainly speak to it if teachers have a preference, but based on our conversations, I think our at least, the ABEA prefers option C, but I wanted to propose both in deference to the committee. They both end at the exact same day. There's no difference in the change of school. I looked at options to try and move the November professional day, like either before school started or some alternative date. None of it really worked. And so unfortunately, November still gets broken up because you have a professional day and the Veterans Day holiday. We're keeping it in November because once we do hit a presidential election, we're going to have that day off because of traffic on campus. But I think putting it next to a weekend, to me, seems a little bit better than having, 2 no school days broken up over the course of a week. That just feels odd. So that's where we're at in terms of the calendar for next year. Option B or C.
Mike, would you like to speak to this really quick, just because Peter mentioned that you helped work on this?
To do this by now. I'll be honest, I hate talking about the calendar because no one ever agrees on it. And so it's the hardest thing for me as the president of the union to manage. But I can speak pretty confidently that given the choice between coming back on Friday the 25th and having the Friday before Labor Day off versus coming back Monday the 28th and working a full week, I think I can say confidently most teachers would prefer to just work that full week. I think as an educator, you sort of have your summer mode and your school mode. And once you're in school mode, you're back and you might as well get to work. I know speaking with lots of educators that if you're not traveling that 4-day weekend, if you're not going away for Labor Day, you're often in school getting ready for the school year. And so I'm sure there are some members who would prefer to have that Friday before Labor Day off, but I think starting on that Monday and just teaching through a full week would probably be the preference of the teachers.
Thank you. And now I'll open it up. Hi, Liz.
I also just wanted to sort of echo that. As a working mother, it's a lot easier for me to plan for, that full week of summer activities and then the following full week, or even if it's a half week, but not having it broken up by the Friday. I also prefer this calendar.
Yep, and I thought I saw your hand earlier.
Yeah, I thought originally I just wanted to tell, what are the key differences? Mainly, I just noticed this is September 1st, right? That's the difference between C and B, right? September 1st originally in B is a no school, but in C is has school. And yeah, I think C makes sense to me, and also this looks bigger. So.
Hi, Evelyn.
Yeah, so I just wanted to confirm that for the C, the 14th, does that factor in the snow days as well as an end date? Or
No, that's the 180th day.
Oh,
If we have
okay.
snow days, the
So if we have snow
181st
days-
day is now the 18th. The 182nd day would be the 20th, and then the 21st, 24th, and 25th. So again, we're really,
Cutting it close.
yeah, it's really unfortunate the way the end of the year plays out there.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Julie, for the lovely formatting. I too prefer option C. I would make one comment, though, that I feel like we've gone a very long way to represent equally all of the cultural holidays that we have in our community. And I wonder if, just on a formatting note, these two additional holidays that don't fall on school days seem to be an afterthought at the bottom of the calendar. And I wonder if there's a way, maybe even in the central column, just to include them even though they're on weekends, because it doesn't feel right to have, deliberated so much last year about the inclusion of Diwali on the calendar, and because it doesn't fall on a school day now, it gets to be 5 points smaller and in the bottom left-hand corner. Other than that, I love the calendar. I think the schedule itself is great.
We can look at that. We tried to really just list the no school days, but if you want the holidays up there, we can go for it.
Further discussion? I will also accept motions.
I would like to move to approve the calendar for the 2023-2024 academic year.
Which calendar?
I would like to approve option C.
Okay, so that's Liz and Ginny for the second. Ginny's on a roll today. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, very good. That passed unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, subcommittee and member reports. I know we just heard from Adam about the budget. Okay, here we go. So at our last meeting, the committee approved the creation of the new SRO subcommittee. Do we have a memo for that? That was in the packet?
So there was a memo in your packet with some details of the survey results from who applied. Before we list the actual names, we've reached out to all members of the committee. Adam and I met to look at who could serve on that committee. We've reached out with invitations to multiple stakeholders within all of those groups. But before we release their names publicly, we want them to confirm with us that they're actually interested. So as soon as we have that, we'll get back to you with that, and then we'll get some meetings set up and going. You can certainly announce the chair.
Okay, great. So, all right. So the members on the subcommittee are going to be Adam, who's going to chair it, Becca, and Amy. Thank you so much for volunteering. So I've appointed that person. I've appointed these members, and I'm asking for confirmation from school committee members. Is there a sense from the committee that the chair and the members are confirmed?
Yes, so moved if necessary.
I don't think we need to vote on it. I just want to make sure we're all good with that.
Yes, thank you for volunteering for that tough job, you guys, really.
Yes, thank you for that.
I'll also just note, as Adam and I thought about extending invitations to people who had expressed interest, it was really important to us to have, you know, both a diversity of thought in the group and a diversity of backgrounds and life experiences, so that we had a really good group who could think in deep and complex ways about an important topic.
So we will have full names and everything next time. Community engagement. Ginny, your mic is on.
Acton-Boxborough Regional School District Community Engagement Subcommittee met on December 16th to review policy committee engagement plans and additional outreach. We're preparing a plan for the school committee to better engage with the community in a working session for February, inclusive of a content calendar to help explain our budget to how to get the word out. We'll meet again tomorrow morning.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So policy. So a first read of the proposed revision for class size guideline policy file IIBA is up for a second read. Ginny, do you want to talk to it?
Yeah, I think as we talked about the last time we looked at this, which I believe was in very early December, so a while back now, that the policy subcommittee discussed and struggled with this topic over a number of meetings with the assistance of our director of special projects, Andrew Shen, and just determined that the number of complexities and variations across the grades and certainly, you know, the junior high and the high school, but particularly with regard to the high school, that we felt that any more specific guidelines were really going to, you know, cause unforeseen and sometimes foreseen detriments to programming, teachers, and students. So we determined after a lot of discussion to leave it more general. Peter was in some of those meetings. I think Marie was in some of those meetings. So, you know, we really looked at it from any number of angles. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk to any of you who struggle to understand, you know, why it was such a struggle. But in the end, I think that we came to a complete consensus that this was kind of the best that we could do without causing harm, and that we weren't going to see any benefit by being, you know, more specific or restrictive.
So would you like to make a motion?
So I would move to approve it as contained in the packet.
Okay, so that's Ginny moving and Amy seconding. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much. Negotiations. We had an executive session to talk about negotiations to update the committee today, and we will update you with more as soon as we can. Cool? All right, very good. So consent agenda. Given that there's only one item on the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting on December 15th, 2022?
Move to approve the minutes of December 15th, 2022.
Second.
Brilliant. That's Adam and Liz. All those in favor? Aye. No opposed. Very good. That's unanimous. Thank you so much. Statement of warrants and recommendation to approve them. Who's got it?
This one's me today. I move that the school committee vote to approve the below-listed warrants totaling $10,552,554.17. AP vendor warrants as follows. 23-012A dated December 15th, 2022 in the amount of $177,488.12. 23-013 dated December 22nd, 2022, in the amount of $1,800,724.03. 23-013A, dated 12/29/2022, in the amount of $68,593.75. 23-014, dated January 5th, 2023, in the amount of $411,773.11. Also, payroll vendor warrants as follows. 23-012PR, dated December 15th, 2022, in the amount of $636,256.17. 23-013PR, dated December 29th, 2022, in the amount of $1,510,754.29. And the payroll warrants as follows. P2312 dated December 15th, 2022 in the amount of $2,978,263.78. P2313 dated December 29th, 2022 in the amount of $2,960,090.62. And student activities warrant as follows: 23-013JH dated December 22nd, 2022 in the amount of $8,610.30. Bam.
I need a second. Second. Ginny is on it today. All those in favor? Aye. Very good. Okay, so everybody but Adam, who abstained. He did not oppose, he abstained. It passed, but Adam abstained. I abstained. Yes, thank you. I had a reimbursement. Yes, and it totally makes sense. We totally get it. Thank you so much. All right, Peter, would you like to highlight anything before we adjourn?
Sure. I'll just highlight that the Acton annual election calendar is in your packet, as well as the election schedule for Boxborough. You know, one thing, and I know Kyra announced at the beginning of the meeting that she wasn't running for re-election, but it can also be helpful to the community to have a sense of who's planning to or not planning to run for re-election, because sometimes I know people in the community may either decide to withhold their name from consideration because they think a seat's going to be occupied by someone returning. So as you're thinking, we're entering that season where it can become helpful to start to talk about that as a committee. Because also knowing kind of the schedules, that can impact how we end the current year as well, because Acton still has that bylaw that, you know, the new committee takes over right after town meeting ends. And so that is not the end of our school year. So we still have to have a plan to get through the rest of the school year.
Godspeed. Godspeed to all of y'all.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Ooh. All right, Liz gets it. All right, so it was Adam who moved and Liz who adjourned. All those in favor? Aye. Have a great evening, y'all.